The off season has started for a lot of teams, right? And it's going to be a long one, right? There's going to be a lot of downtime for the teams that didn't make champs, and even the teams that did make champs, there's going to be a lot of downtime. And unless you win champs this year, there's going to be a lot of sort of like what if feelings, Why couldn't we win? Why did this go wrong? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I saw this tweet from T1 Rossi that really made me want to talk about this subject. So the tweet was, life is really hard these days. What am I supposed to do with my life? I should have won more and all that, but seriously, when am I even going to play again? 4 months, 6 months? I'm curious how any of the players on teams that didn't make it to champs this year feel. I've never felt like I've had less purpose in my life. Truly, the schedule makes me depressed, and I wouldn't doubt other players feel the same. I think that this sentiment is extremely real, and I don't, blame him for feeling this way, because from my own experience as a competitor in sports and stuff like that, I remember when I would go to the off season, or for example, when I quit playing baseball after making it basically my entire life's purpose to play baseball, it took a long time for me to get over the fact that I wasn't like grinding for this one purpose of playing professionally again. And in esports, where like, for example, Rossi, I don't think he might still be signed to T1, but I think it's pretty obvious that he's not going to be there next year. Um, like these things are very kind of in flux, and it can be really easy to kind of like lose hope and lose sight of what you're doing. Um, and so I think it's really important to understand how to get better, because I think, at least from my experience working with players in Valorant, I think that a lot of people don't understand how to get better. And I think that's one of the reasons why the game, in my opinion, is very stagnant in terms of its actual growth of skill. I think that right now, if we were to look at like a Valorant player right now, let's just take a duelist, for example. We've got our duelist, and let's say we have three different stats. We've got aim and mechanics, communication and teamwork. So aim and mechanics, communication and teamwork, and then we have like flexibility and creativity. So we'll just say flexibility. Right now, I think that if you had to fill in these as like a graph, right? Let's do like a little bar graph. Aim and mechanics is, and we'll put like 100 up here. 100. This is like maximum percent of how good people are. 0%. Aim and mechanics, I think we're pretty solid. Like sometimes new agents come out and then it's a little bit difficult to play them. Not everybody's super good at Neon, for example, in the movement, but people are getting better at it. But aim and mechanics, I'd say we're probably at like a good, 85 to 90% most of the time. At least like at like the tier 1 or high tier 2 level. These are like most players are somewhere in that range. Which is good. Like people are really good at the game on an individual level. When it comes to communication and teamwork, it really depends on the player, really depends on the game, or I mean on the team. I'd say that teams that are, or players that are on good high level teams are probably somewhere in like the, I don't know, maybe like 40 to 50%, depending. This could be more of a range. Like you could have certain people that are like more up here, and then you might have some people that are more down here. It really just depends on the player. But we'll say, like kind of averaged out, we'll say like 45%. Okay. Communication, teamwork. This is like the average Valorant player who is either in tier 1 or in tier 2 trying to go tier 1. When it comes to flexibility and creativity, we are at like, that actually might be too high. We're about here. This is like 5 to 8%. And that's a huge problem, because that's a metric that is absolutely vital to being a good player in this game, and yet almost nobody is practicing it or trying to improve on it. Um, if you want a long career in this game, yes, you must be a skilled player. You absolutely have to have mechanics to hang with the best players in the world. However, having worked with free agent tier 3 players in North America, um, close to tier 2 players in North America, uh, game changers players in Europe, tier 2, almost tier 1 players in Europe, the level of mechanics between all of those people is like maybe 5 to 10% difference maximum between like the worst player I've worked with and the best player I've worked with. It's really not that big, okay? It's very, very, very possible that there are players that are playing tier 3 or literally just playing ranked that have better mechanics than some of the best players in tier 1. I've straight up seen this. I've straight up seen this. Look at people who get pulled out of ranked. Karen for Genji gets pulled out of ranked. I think everybody would kind of agree that he might be the best mechanical smokes player in the entire world. You know, Colum for Ascent is a great example of this. He's super cracked player, basically was just playing ranked, was playing Fortnite before Valorant, and he's one of the best mechanical players I've ever seen. So aim and mechanics is really not that important. If you're capable of playing at a tier 1 level, your aim and mechanics are going to be good enough, right? Like there's just a certain level that the aim and mechanics will be at if you're like anywhere close to playing tier 1, tier 2. Let's talk about communication and teamwork, right? Communication and teamwork. So this one is an area that I think a lot of people are kind of figuring out now is very important, especially with people like Zelsis coming to prominence. You know, the removal and then re-addition of FNS. You know, the idea that teams need to be vibing. They need to have a vibes guy. They need to have somebody who is, you know, pulling the team through hard moments. This is the type of communication teamwork that's really, really important. And obviously just good communication in general, as far as like, you know, oh, he's one shot back plat. Like that type of communication is also very important. And a lot of people are not really good at that. So that's kind of why I put this at like 45%, is because there's a lot of people who like don't really understand how to comm very well, even at very high levels of play. Like their aim and mechanics are insane, but their communication is like kind of mid or not very good. They say stuff that's really unimportant. They complain about dying. They don't understand what is good to talk about as far as like what information is useful. For example, you know, somebody might be like, I saw Omen C, right? Okay, cool. Well, he's played there for the last like 10 rounds. So that's not really that important of a communication. But if you say Omen used smoke 3 seconds ago C and I saw him back plat, that type of communication is way more valuable, right? Because now I know for a fact that Omen is playing here and has used 1 smoke. Okay. Now I know there's 1 more smoke. So if I draw that out in the next 15 seconds, we have the ability to go anywhere on the map and cannot be stopped by smoke. Very, very good information to give to your teammates. So that type of communication is something that, you know, it varies wildly. Some people are good at comms, some people are not good at comms. And then of course there's the communication of sort of like the vibes and keeping the team atmosphere good and making sure you're gassing up your teammates, making sure that your teammates know that you trust them and have confidence in them, giving them options. For example, one thing that I've noticed certain players do well, other players don't do very well, is that there's a huge difference between being like, I have a flash, go do this. I'm flashing for you now. 1, 2, 3. And I have a flash, Do you want me to flash for you? Where do you want me to flash for you? And you'd be surprised how many players at high levels ask these types of questions. Okay. If you are trying to do stuff in this game, a lot of the times it needs to be done instantly. Like, you don't have time to ask if your teammate wants you to do something. You need to say, I'm flashing for you, and then they need to do the action, right? And this is stuff that you have to develop through playing with your team. And actually, I think one thing that a lot of people maybe don't appreciate very well is that if you're in the off season right now and you feel like you want to get better at sort of like these micro comms, it's really, really good to have a consistent duo that you play with on a regular basis, and maybe even look for a team together with your duo. Because if you come into a team and you have this insane, like instantaneous, almost mind meld type of communication, you can look so good in this game, because instead of having like a couple of second delay between when you want to do a play and when it actually happens, you can just do the play. Like, this is one of the reasons that Paper X is so fucking good, is because they duo together all the time. There's a reason that Forsaken and Jing are so in sync during the game. It's because they duo together all the time. So when Jing wants to make a play, Forsaken is like, I got stunned. I'm stunning for you. And then Jing just goes, right? There's no like, hey, I have this piece of utility. Would you like me to use it for you? If so, where would you like me to use it for you? Oh, you don't want me to use it for you? Okay, well, what about this, right? That's way too long, way too complicated, way too slow. But if you and your teammate can get on the same page, where it's just like, you know what you want to accomplish in the round and you know how to accomplish it, and it's just a matter of being like the timing, then that is where you become like a real, like, excellent teammate, and the utility becomes really, really in flow, and the speed at which you make decisions in the game looks like you're doing things at like almost inhuman speed. So I would say that, because I think a lot of players, when they're in the off season, are going to just be doing stuff like, well, I just want to get better at the game. Okay, I'm just going to play ranked. I'm going to play like, 10 games of ranked a day. And it's just like, you just log in, you're just solo queuing, maybe you duo here and there. You're just like locking Jet again. Okay, cool, whatever. Like, don't do that. That's such a waste of time. You've already done that for 3 years probably at this point. What you should do is you should be like, find yourself a duo that plays the supportive role if you play the duelist, or if you're the supportive player, find yourself a duelist, or if you're a smokes player, find yourself a sentinel or something like that. Like, find somebody that kind of complements your role and do combos with them. Let's say you're a duelist and you think that it would probably be a good idea to learn Neon for the 2025 season. Okay, find yourself a breach player, find yourself a sky player, find yourself somebody that complements your Neon, and then just run games with them. Doesn't matter what the map is, just run games with them and figure out what that flow is like. Figure out what the communication is like. Figure out how the utility works together. Figure out how the sort of like layering of your plays works together. I feel like people are not doing this. I mean, some people probably are, but the vast majority of players, when they think that they're just trying to like grind to get better, they just play ranked. And it's like mindlessly playing the game over and over and over and over and over. And they're just like not making the progress that they could be making if they actually took a systematic approach to it. And then, okay, let's talk about the last factor, the flexibility and creativity. My biggest pet peeve is this one. I cannot understand how so few people do not understand how to play 80% of the agents in the game. And I am talking about at a high level. I'm talking about tier 1 players that know that Yoru is strong, and yet they don't fucking play the agent. What are you doing? Why are you not playing this agent? It's so obvious that he's massively overpowered. He's been massively overbuffed. There's a couple of teams that are running him and showing you the potential, and people are like, I think I'll just pick Jet. It's like, are you even trying to get better at this game? And I'm sorry that this is sounding like very, very derogatory, but it's like, people are just so lazy. They just don't get better at the game because they don't try or they don't know how to do it. Okay. This creativity and flexibility category for the average Valorant player is like almost not even remotely close to being developed. You know, who do we celebrate as being flexible in the game? Let's look at Forsaken, for example. Let's just look at Forsaken. He's like one of the widely regarded flex players. Okay, here's Forsaken's agent pool in the last 60 days. KO, Breach, Harbor, Yoru, Sky, Fade, Cypher, Neon. Okay, so that's one roll, kind of two-ish, but basically one roll with the Flash Initiator. We've got a Smoke / Initiator character in Harbor. We've got a Duelist / Initiator in Yoru. We've got another Info / Flash Initiator. We've got an Info Initiator. We've got an Info Sentinel. And then we have the Hard Dive Neon. So we've got like 4 different roles. We've got 8 different agents in the last 60 days. The last 90 days, this probably goes up even more. Yet we've got another agent in there in the Sova. And then, of course, all time, he's played basically every agent in the game. Why is this so impressive? Because nobody else is doing this. It's not because they can't do it, but people just don't do this. I want to actually look at his tracker, for example. I wonder if I can find it. I assume he's probably on the leaderboard and on an APAC, but yeah, okay, here's Forsaken. Here's Forsaken's tracker. Okay, so this act, let's look at how many matches he's played. Actually, let's look at how many agents he played. Okay, look at this. This is just this act. This act, he's played Sova, Yoru, Killjoy, Jet, Neon, Cypher, Raze, KO, Fade, Breach, Clove, Omen, Chamber, Harbor, ISO, Sky, Sage, Deadlock, Gecko, Brimstone, Reyna, and Viper. He's played every single one of these agents this act. Okay? What about last act? Raze, Sova, Cypher, Jet, Breach, Fade, Killjoy, Yoru, KO, Viper, Neon, ISO, Brimstone, Deadlock, Gecko, Omen, Sky, Clove, Sage, Harbor, Chamber, Phoenix, Astra, and Reyna. I mean, he is playing everything, right? And sure, he's definitely playing more of certain things, right? But let me go back to the leaderboard. Just out of curiosity, and hopefully I'm not going to flame anybody here, but let's just look at the top NA player. I don't know who Kane Zera is. Okay, so he's playing a decent amount of stuff, but it's like, 64 games of ISO. And let's go to all time, all acts. I'm gonna guess there's gonna be a huge amount of Jet, Reyna. Yep, Jet, Reyna, Raze. Okay, so I mean, at least there's some variety here, right? We've got over 100 hours of Sky, we've got over 100 hours of Sage, over 100 hours of Omen. 800 hours of Reyna, 1,500 matches of Reyna. Surely you have learned all the mechanics that Reyna has to offer after like 300 matches, right? Again, not to flame this Kane Zera guy, because he actually does play a fairly wide variety of stuff, but I don't think that you needed to play 1,500 matches of Reyna to learn the mechanics, right? I don't think you needed to do that. Let's look at all acts for a second. I'm sure there's going to be a similar thing, right? Because everybody started off this way. Yeah. 1,300 matches of Jet. But then look at this. Okay. 1,300 matches of Jet, almost 1,000 matches of Raze. Okay. That's already better. There's no Reyna until down here. And then he goes 500 matches of Sova, 300 matches of Cypher, 300 Killjoy, 300 Fade, 300 Yoru. Like, this is what I want to see as a coach. If I'm trying to find players out there to bring them up to tier 2 or tier 1, I want players who can play multiple roles, who will go from agent to agent without complaining, who will be able to slot into certain spots that you need to be able to slot into when you're shifting your comp around for other people's comfort. And if you have a player that can only play Jet, Reyna, and maybe Raze at this point, like, you're just a liability to the team, straight up. So I think if you want to give yourself the best shot to be a tier 1 player with a long career, you need to have the ability to play one primary role at a super high level, and that includes playing every single character in that role. So let's say you're an initiator player that focuses on recon. That means you need to be a very good Sova. You need to be a very good Fade. You need to be a good KO. You need to probably be a good Sky as well. And then on top of that, you should also have a secondary role that you can play at the same level. And that could be anything, straight up. Like you could be an info initiator and a duelist player. That's fine. You could be an info initiator and smokes player. You could be a sort of like flash flex second entry player and a sentinel player. All of that is totally cool. But what you can't be is you can't be a jet one trick. You can't be just a Cypher and Killjoy player. We're past that point. It doesn't work that way anymore. You cannot be a top tier player unless you can play multiple roles and you have mastered at least like 80% of the agents in that role silo. So when it comes to the off season, I think that's something that basically every player not named Forsaken can work on. Is, what other agents are interesting to me? What other agent could possibly expand my horizons? Because remember, the more you play one agent, the better you get at that agent, but also the better you get at learning how to play against that agent, right? So, for example, if you're a duelist player and you are really annoyed at how Cypher or maybe the new Deadlock is really fucking you up when you try to entry onto the site, you should probably play like 200 games of Cypher and Deadlock in this offseason and figure out what makes them good, what makes them bad, what are the strengths and weaknesses, how do you beat this? Because now you have a whole nother perspective on how to play the game. And you also know how your teammate that plays that role on your team needs to work around you or with you. And so when people are just so siloed into their one thing and they're so focused on, I just need to, grind my mechanics, more jet, more Reyna, it's just totally inefficient. It doesn't make you a better team player. It doesn't make you a better asset to a team. It makes you a liability, straight up. So that is like my biggest piece of advice is expand your horizons, work with a duo, intentionally work on new stuff to make yourself more creative, more flexible. And then also, if you've worked with a coach in the past, just ask them for feedback. I guarantee you that every coach that's ever worked with a player has a couple of things that they could help that player with, whether it's decision making, whether it's just like a setup or two, whether it's some communication stuff. And so many players just don't recognize that the coaches like only want you to get better. They only want to help. And it's not about ego, it's not about being right or wrong. It's like, I just want to help you get better, so just ask me for feedback and I will give it to you. Okay. This is like the biggest thing that I've noticed in esports is that most players didn't get into their position in esports by coming up through a system of, being mentored at a young age, going through several teams, like learning how to work with authority. This is something that I got as a player in baseball and many other sports growing up, is that from the age of like 4, I had a coach teaching me stuff. And so I got used to being told what I was doing right and wrong. I got used to taking that feedback, using it, getting better. But in esports, most people got to their positions by just being alone in their room, grinding the game. And so when they get into these environments with a coach or with other teammates who are giving them feedback, there's like this big ego thing where it's like the only reason that they got to where they are is because of themselves. But now it's not enough. Now you have to be willing to like set the ego aside and recognize that you don't know anything. You don't know everything because nobody knows everything. I don't know everything, even as the coach from the outside perspective with a more global view of everything. I don't know everything. I talk to other coaches all the time because I need to expand my perspective as well. And so players need to do this. And right now in esports, and I'm talking about not just Valorant, but like all across esports, this like mentoring system is sorely lacking. And it's one of the biggest problems, I think, with the development of players that stunts the growth of so many people is that they just don't know how to get better. And also, the ego is blocking them from getting better because they're just so used to only being reliant on themselves when we're playing a team game where the collective performance of the team is reliant on being a like cohesive unit as opposed to just five very good players all trying to do their own individual shit. So yeah,